The modern era is often referred to as the information age, and for good reason. As coders replace factory workers and algorithms push out heavy machinery, we truly live in the age where data reigns above all. As the sociobiologist and futurist Rebecca Costa so eloquently put it in her book, On the Verge, every day our ability to anticipate future outcomes grows more acute, more all-encompassing, and extends further out. This sea change has equipped today's leaders with previously unimaginable power, the power to respond and shape events before they occur. We stand on the cusp of what Darwin himself might have called pre-adaptation, the ability to adapt a priori. We sat down with Costa earlier to discuss how the modern deluge of information is changing our ability to shape the future.
Well, I think data is forcing our hand. As you know, we began with data production. That became the name of the game in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. And then after that, we had so much data, we couldn't really put it to good use. And so we went through a data analysis phase. But we've now moved out of data analysis into predictive analytics, models which allow us now to forecast with unprecedented accuracy. In other words, the future, as much as we like to say the future is unknown, there could not be a more false statement. The future is in fact known. And once you know what the future is, it dramatically affects how you make decisions today. And that is what our leaders are up against. I can give you some examples if you like.
Please do.
Please do.
So let's talk about, for example, the opioid epidemic. Right now, several industrialized nations are trying to deal with people who started out with a prescription drug and now are hopelessly addicted to opioids. It turns out that a company named Fuzzy Logics, I don't mind using their name, by using medical records and looking at public activities, behaviors of human beings, they can identify up to 85% of those people who are predisposed to become opioid addicts, so that first doctor's prescription need never be written. In this way, we can get out ahead of our problems. We don't need to have these problems because we have the analytic ability now to prevent them.
That's fascinating.
And it's interesting you brought up Fuzzy Logics because they started in the healthcare field, and then now they actually do predictive modeling for financial sectors, banking, retail, all of that. And predictive modeling has been very helpful in, diabetes, health-related things. We're now able to see a little bit better. But I wonder what the consequences, because getting the data is not a problem. We sort of give that out for free in our daily lives of social media and everything else. What are the consequences of having that kind of power to be able to model these things and predict things with data? And what are the long-term effects that kind of power has on leadership?
Well, it has a tremendous power because it means that those with the data and the analytic abilities, those with the predictive models, will dominate. Let me give you another example in business, a business example, because in healthcare, we could look at the fact that we now have genetic profiles on people, and we know the predisposition that they have for certain diseases, certain cancers, Alzheimer's, even baldness, at the time that they're born. We can do genetic testing, and then we can act prophylactically to help them. In many cases, we can do, certain kinds of genetic treatments to prevent diseases. This is a power we never had before, and so we can easily understand that in healthcare. But let's look in business. Once businesses, and I'm talking about the largest retailers in the world, discovered that as the climate warms, milk production in cows goes down. So as the season warms up, their productivity in producing milk starts to go down. As soon as they saw that relationship, they began tapping NASA's meteorological data and then locking in milk prices before temperatures went up.
Wow. Wow, that is
that's getting way out ahead of the curve. And so the people who have these predictive models are able to use these models to eliminate all risk. In other words, predictive analytics is the end of risk. Through using these, insurance companies will no longer have group healthcare programs. They'll have individualized programs that will have absolutely zero risk, because based on your behaviors, the environment that you live in and that you work in, based on your genetic predispositions, all that data will come together, and they will be able to put an insurance plan together that is uniquely adapted to you.
I have to ask, because it sounds both incredible, but also, why? I mean, I think to anybody just kind of hearing this, it sounds like, woo, this is very, futuristic and predictive, and seems almost a little invasive with the amount of information that they would have. Are there any, downsides to corporations or political leaders or whatever having this kind of, ability to see into the future, so to speak? Like, what would be the downsides?
I get asked this all the time, and I have to say that anytime we come up with any new technology, anytime we progress in society, there's going to be a downside. Someone's going to abuse it. I mean, that would be like saying, if we only hadn't come up with the internet, we wouldn't have hackers.
Right.
Great point.
True. True. We wouldn't have hackers without the internet, and we wouldn't have people, we wouldn't have identity theft. Yes, there's always the potential, but we can't allow the downside to prevent humanity from progressing. What we now have in terms of data allows us to evacuate entire cities in advance of hurricanes, as we see going on right now. It allows us to forecast diseases in advance. It allows us to take action when a currency like the euro is being threatened by the debt of Greece. Those were all predictive models. What I don't think people understand is this is happening now. This is not science fiction. This is not going to happen in the future. Businesses are using predictive models today as we speak. So is healthcare. So is the financial industry. Every industry and every leader, every economy will now be able to do something in the present to affect a future outcome. Now think about this. Think about this. This means that we now are taking action over events which have not manifested yet. They haven't occurred yet. And this automatically throws it into a political argument, doesn't it?
It does.
Mm-hmm. Because half the people are going to say that's never going to happen, and the other half are going to say, yes, but we have data and it is going to happen, which is exactly what's going on with climate change.
You're exactly right.
It's become a political football.
Yep, you're exactly right. Exactly right.
One of these things that sort of gets me is when you read all the self-help books, it's all you have to do is do something 10,000 times or get a certain amount of habits, and then there's all this success. But failure, which is, failure is the opposite of success. It's what most of us are trying to avoid. We don't want to fail, but all failure isn't created equally. How has this predictive modeling and big data and the study of it changed how we look at, or how we should look at failure?
Well, one of the things I explain to people is that in a highly complex environment, you have to make friends with failure. And that is because the definition I use of complexity is there are more wrong options than there are right ones. And the number of wrong ones are growing exponentially. Now, in an environment like that, you can't stop and try to call it right. What you've got to do is what you do with your investment portfolio, as an example. There's an example of a complex, dynamic environment. Certainly, you don't go out and put all of your money on one stock. If you have, then good luck to you. You're just gambling. But what you do is, in a complex environment, you spread it around, and as bonds go up, stocks come down, maybe real estate investments go up and stocks come down. You hope to have enough diversity that you're going to come out ahead in the end. And that is also true in any kind of complex, dynamic environment like the one that we're going through right now. Until predictive analytics can for certain predict the outcomes of virtually everything, we are left with trying to navigate a very complex environment where there are more wrong choices than there are right ones. And the best way to do that is to use diversification. Even venture capitalists only get it right 10 or 15% of the time, and think of the due diligence that they do. right? So, you know, you're not going to call it right all the time, make an allowance and make friends with failure. But here is the key: fail fast and move on.
That's good.
I like
good,
that.
Good. Yeah, that's a very great bit of advice. Fail fast and then move on. Pick yourself up. Keep going. I think we all could agree to that. I have one final question, because it just kind of struck me, is where does something like, let's say, you know, a chaos theory get into predictive analytics, knowing that, you know, the predictability of the unpredictability of the world? Where does that fall in predictive analytics?
I will tell you that there will be no more unpredictability.
Okay.
We will know the outcome of absolutely everything in the future. The only question that remains is, will we take action? You know, we're finding out in the terrorist attack in Barcelona, in the Paris terrorist attacks in 2015. As we go backwards, we find that these terrorists gave us every clue. We had warnings on the 2015 Paris attack from Turkey and from Iraq. They knew exactly the cells. They knew the actors. But the problem is that we find out about this after the fact. And so the real question is, if we have the data, if we know the probability is in the 99 percentile that these nefarious actors are going to commit an act, what are we prepared to do?